St Llangwnnadl was one of the first pioneering missionaries to build a church here on the Llyn Peninsula, and one of the few to be buried inside the church, so that when the pilgrims came from the north on their way to Bardsey and they stopped here, one of the last major resting places, it was a shrine to St Llangwnnadl then, and his name means life of light. Donations from the pilgrims over the years meant that the church could be extended in the 16th century. In fact, it now has enough room for 3 altars along the east wall. This little church is in a delightful setting, in a hollow, by a stream, with the trees around it. And when the pilgrims came resting before their final spurt to go across to Bardsey, I wonder, as they sat and rested, what they thought, thinking about what was ahead of them. Some of them, many of them, I expect, would never have been in a boat before. Some of them may not have seen the sea if they lived inland. And so they had to trust to God to look after them and keep them safe, because on this most important journey of their life. If pilgrims were travelling this time of the year, they would have foraged in the hedgerows for things to eat, blackberries and these little blackberries here on the bush, and other things that they would have been more aware of than us, I'm sure. We are having our refreshments at a Llyn Pilgrim, where the pilgrims would have gathered as before they went to Bardsey Island to stop and have their refreshments and their rest. And very nice it is too. Aberdaron and St Hwyn's Church, the last church the pilgrims would gather to before they went and crossed the seas to Bardsey Island. And so it's a large church because of that. And St Hwyn was a 6th century Celtic saint who probably had an oratory here. And then the church was built later in stone by one of the Welsh kings, Dafydd ap Gruffudd. St Hwyn's Church is tucked into the hillside, but even so, as you approach it, the sea is so close. In fact, There has to be a big stone wall and iron railings around the graveyard to stop the erosion. But what must the pilgrims have felt when they came here, days when the sea would be lashing against the wall? But they would have found shelter and protection inside the church for their prayers before they finally set sail for Bardsey. This church became a sanctuary church. That is, it was a church where disputes were heard and where fugitives could claim refuge for 40 days and 40 nights. A very important place. Some time ago, people were asked to collect pebbles from the beach, to write their name of whoever they wanted to pray for, and to place it as a cairn. And then the last Sunday of October, all the pebbles are taken down at low tide onto the beach, placed in a cruciform setting so that the sea reclaims the pebbles again. It's a lovely idea. And there's a little inscription by the cairn which reads as this: "Be hopeful, be expectant, drive safely, otherwise take risks. The best advice yet, written for modern pilgrims." This could have been the path that the pilgrims took from Aberdaron around the cliff to Porthmaidi to get the boat to Bardsey. As they went along, they would be hoping around each corner that they would be seeing Bardsey, but it's not yet. The pilgrims would be so pleased to come down the cliff path to the little harbour where hopefully a boat would be waiting for them to take them across to Bardsey, and hopefully as well the weather would be all right to do it, because though it looks very calm there at the moment, once you've rounded the corner you'll be meeting the full force of the currents and the winds. Today's boats for Bardsey are not sailing, because though the sea looks like a mill pond to us from here, the sailors know what it's like around the headland, and it's far too rough. But for the pilgrims in the Middle Ages, they wouldn't have seen Bardsey until they'd got on the boat and rounded the headland here.
Here I stand, looking out to sea. and I say a prayer that the wild goose will come to me. That the wild goose will come to me.
From the edge of the peninsula, the pilgrims would head over to Bardsey Island, where 3 pilgrimages to there were the equivalent of 1 to Rome. So why did pilgrims go on pilgrimages? Well, the aim was to have their sins forgiven, their spirit purified, and to gain relief from the fires of hell on Judgment Day. It is no wonder that this place is called Pendraw Byd, the world's end. Bardsey was like a middle ground between the land of the living and the afterlife, a sacred destination as the end of the journey that gave life meaning. Around the middle of the 6th century, Dyfrig, who was Bishop of South Wales and who appointed Illtyd as Abbot of Llangwnnadl, Dyfrig, together with a group of companions including Cadfan, Llyn, Maelrys and Baglan, made their way to Llyn and on to Bardsey, where Cadfan is credited with founding the abbey. Cadfan and his companions Maelrys and Llyn among them were all Bretons who had studied under St Illtyd at the great monastery at Llangwnnadl. By the 12th century, a legend grew that up to 20,000 saints were buried on Bardsey, so great was its fame as a monastic retreat for holy people. In Welsh, Bardsey is known as Ynys Enlli, which means the island in the currents. And looking at it, you can see why.
There are nights that are so still that I can hear the small owl calling far off and a fox barking miles away. It is then that I lie in the lean hours awake, listening to the swell born somewhere in the Atlantic, rising and falling, wave on wave, on the long shore by the village that is without light and companions. And the thought comes of that other being who is awake too, letting our prayers break on him, not like this for a few hours, but for days, years, for eternity.